Welcome to Doc's Lab and our second Master Series. Welcome to Doc's Lab and our second Master Series. I do believe this is the 106th video in our second Master Series, the 55th video on basic processors, the 18th video on sculpting processors, and the second video on saturation. So basically, I would like you to go back and watch the videos on my channel, if you can, about noise, saturation, distortion, and sound itself. It'll help you to have a lot better understanding of saturation. And also, I want you to get you set up to do this experiment. Basically, get your DAW set up to where you have a tone generator at the beginning coming into your system on one of your channels that doesn't have any audio on it, and whatever saturation plugins that you have, and also a scope and a spectrum analyzer at the end of the chain, so that we can take a look at saturation with from a tone generator giving us a tone and saturation off of that. So get yourself set up and I will see you in just a moment. Okay, so let's take a look at some distortion or some saturation really quick. First of all, I've got all these plugins on here that we'll go through, but let's take a look at basic saturation really quick. We have this basic sinusoid that I've turned on this tone generator, and we're looking at it with my spectrum analyzer. You can look at it with your scope also, and I do suggest you do so you can get used to seeing how it affects the sound. And we've talked about that quite a bit. But if I just pull out something like Trash 2 here and say, okay, what I'm going to try to do on this is I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to turn it on and I'm going to do saturation. Now on my presets, I have the saturation full spectrum working off the fundamental. So the fundamental harmonic would be what we're working off. In this case, it's not a timbre, it's one tone. So you've got to come off here. This is a really good look at really good saturation. You have some lower end stuff going off here. It's fold back distortion. After it goes up so high, it's a very complicated subject, but sometimes you might have to filter some of that out. And you can see how it's also affecting the sinusoid. You can see the sideband distortion, it moving up and down like it is off to the side with the actual saturation. So it's affecting the fundamental also. This is a really good example of good saturation because it's fairly full spectrum after the fundamental, which would be working off the timbre and the sinusoids, and then it's just kind of musical tones, not noise, that are rolling across the whole spectrum after the fundamental is the hope, but you get this fold back distortion that's kind of a problem. Now you can also adjust its level to where you can actually adjust how much of it goes on there. You can see on the right how it's dropping way down so that I can add how much I want into it. Does that make sense? And it's a pretty simple concept. After that, we get into like square clipping. This is like a square clipping distortion, but this can also be looked at as, you know, you can use it as saturation. You can see it's much more aggressive. There's a lot of odd tones going off of here because of it being a clipping type of distortion. But again, I can tone this down. If you look to the right, I can bring its level way down to where I can use it as a type of saturation. But you could see that it's fairly flat across the spectrum after fundamental. You had some things going on in the lower end that it looks like DC offset or something. You may have to bandpass filter out after doing your work. You may or may not. It may affect the sound in a good way. It just depends. Does that make sense? And so it's still sloping down a little bit like a timbre, you know, more so than the other saturation we're looking at, but it can very much be used as a saturation. But you see this other non-harmonic distortion here that it's not quite so full spectrum. You've got a lot of odd harmonics and then some non-harmonic distortion going on in here that is going to help change the characteristics of the saturation, how it affects the sound. There's links on my channel to go for audio calculations and looking at harmonics, and there's a bunch of links on videos on my channel about harmonics, so you might want to take a look at those. Now, there's other types of this also. You can go in here and go, okay, I want an aggressive distortion. If you look at the way this looks here and I go to aggressive distortion, you can see how it changed. There is much more components happening here. You had before the odd harmonics, then you had a couple of these in here. Now it's adding more in there, and you can see that it's just more distortion. And again, you can bring that down to where it's lower level, and it's it's still sloping like a timbre a lot, but not as not as much that a normal timbre would be. So, and also keep in mind that any of these harmonics that are coming onto here, that if they're landing on another harmonic from the sound, they're just going to boost the sound of that harmonic. If they're off to the side of it, then they're saturating the sound with a different element. So keep that in mind. And you also get into, you can use even and odd harmonics that you can see here. There's even and odd harmonics, odd harmonics, even, odd, all the way across here with some low level saturation. And you can turn those down, bring the gain of those down to where they act more like saturation in their levels. In their levels, they'll be down a lot farther than the primary fundamental that can act. You can use this even and odd harmonics as a type of saturation. Or if you just want to use even harmonics, you can see this is just even harmonics got around here, and if I turn it on here, you can watch them drop off, and you can see just odd harmonics coming off there, and you can drop those levels and use them at a very low level as saturation, which you will see in some of the plugins that we look at. So that's a pretty simple concept, that you have even, odd harmonics, even and odd harmonics, clipping distortion, saturation, full spectrum, and a lot of times that you get this thing happening where you've got clipping distortion or distortion from overdriving the speed capabilities of a circuit, which causes more even harmonics, where clipping causes more odd harmonics. And that one is kind of hard to replicate with most plugins I've seen, and the closest I could get to it is going even harmonics across there and adding some distortion into it to try to emulate overdriving the speed capabilities of a circuit, because you get like this stuff happening here with even harmonics that's more of overdriving the speed capability of a circuit. So those are the most basic type of saturations that you're going to come across. So let's take a look at some plugins and analyze what we're doing and what we're using when we apply some of them. Okay, so what we're going to do is I do highly recommend Trash 2. And you've seen some of the presets I had on there that actually add saturation and distortion and do harmonic work. And it's a highly recommended purchase, and I do believe that it's a justifiable purchase. It is going to probably do a better job than most things you run into as far as plugins. So we're going to go through adding saturation, but we want to go through a few plugins. First of all, with like my Trash 2 here, that I have things set up, you can't exactly see. You're not going to be able to hear what's going on, but you'll be able to see this. So if I go into like my presets and I decide that I'm going to do saturation full spectrum, and I turn it on, that I've got a nice full spectrum of saturation coming off there. And I can adjust the volume levels. I can also do that with my presets. I can add square clipping distortion that you can see very easily going across there, that I can adjust the levels on for a different type of saturation. I can also go in there and I can add with this plugin even or just odd harmonics. I could add both of them with different plugins to emulate overdriving the speed capabilities of a circuit a little bit, overdriving the amperage capabilities of a circuit a little bit to give those two different types of saturations. I can add aggressive distortion that has a different effect, that's a little bit different that we talked about. I can do quite a bit of things with this plugin, so it's very useful. But those are the basic things that we're looking at. And you can basically add most types of saturations that you would be using with this plugin. And I do have presets that I can send you if you want. Hey, really quick, I want to make an addendum, because when we're looking at these processors and things, that you also have to take in consideration compressors, expanders, limiters, and things like maximizers. We're not really going to talk about them, but they can, in certain applications, cause distortion and saturation. The problem is that a good compressor, expander, limiter, whatever in your DAW isn't going to do that unless you really overdrive it too much, and you will get clipping type of distortion, which is normally odd harmonics mixed with non-harmonic distortion if you push it too hard. But in your DAW, on outboard gear, electronic gear, you can get some really nice saturation sometimes, and some other type of compressors, expanders, limiters, or maximizers that are built to emulate that. But in the DAW, most of the time, if I have put like a tone generator here and I put on a sine wave, and I turn on this, say, compressor, and I kick the ratio up, I put it to a really hard knee, drop the attack really hard, and drop that threshold down, what happens? It drops the heck out of the threshold of the sound coming in, but I'm not getting any saturation and distortion. Now, if I do that with an expander, I'll get the same effect. And with the limiter, the same. If I crank up my limiter and I drag that ceiling way down to bring it way down, that I will eventually get the same effect. And I can push it up in there as high as I want, and I can get all kinds of reduction, but I'm not really going to get a whole lot of saturation. It's pretty simple concept. On a sound, it's going to act a little bit differently. And a maximizer or something like that will act a little bit differently in the way that, because the maximizer's algorithm, and a good one, is fairly complicated. So basically, whenever you're looking at that, we're not really taking that in consideration. Now, when you go to do some experimentation on your sounds later, and you want to use your compressors, expanders, limiters, or maximizers to try to get some saturation, you go ahead, because they are used to do that in the studio sometimes. But it not being a piece of hardware and outboard gear, more than likely the people who designed it don't want saturation. They want to do compression and expansion, limiting, and things like that with as little saturation as possible. So you'll have to experiment around with them to see if yours will get saturation, meaning you might want to build some type of simple, make a simple sound and then start experimenting with it, maybe a voice sound, ah, and then see if you start to get some saturation on kick drums, things like that, and experiment around with whatever compressors and limiters, expanders and maximizers you have that can do that. Some of them will. If we're dealing with outboard gear, most definitely we'd be looking at that, but I'm not. I teach normally out of the box, and I teach to use pieces of software that are designed to make stuff like saturation, not trying to use a piece of hardware like a compressor to cause saturation, unless I've bought a piece of outboard gear that, I bought it because it does really nice compression and adds some analog warmth, which sometimes if I push it too hard, adds more saturation, which is odd harmonics mixed most of the time with a little bit of non-harmonic distortion. So we won't really be addressing that, and I just wanted to put an addendum in there because you can experiment around with them, and they will give you some saturation and distortion if you push them too hard. But a lot of times it's not very controlled unless you're dealing with a very nice piece of outboard gear and really know how to attain some saturation from it well, which means I suggest you look at whatever piece of equipment you have that is one of them and find out who's using it to do that and how they're setting up their parameters to achieve some, because we're trying to inject it with actual processors that were made to do that. So on we go. The next thing we look at, if we go along here, we get into something like this wave shaper is free from, it's a computer music plugin that's free. And if I turn this on, that it's adding this type of clipping saturation going across here. And this actually isn't that bad of a saturation coming off of this fundamental that you can see. You can raise it and lower it. It does have, I do believe, an odd harmonic here that's a little spiky, but you can adjust it a little bit with some of these parameters. But it can add a fairly decent type of saturation. And there's plenty of others, but we'll kind of look at them, what we're looking at. Like I've got my neutron exciter here. This is a very strange situation because this thing, what it does is, the understanding of it is if I go to like warmth and I put it up just a little bit, that this is the type of saturation I'm getting, that I can lower the level of it, but you can see the type of harmonics that are coming off of this. There's a harmonics calculation link on my channel that you can get to, and if you don't know, I'll put it here on the channel across there. And if I change this from that warm to, say, this retro, you can see the difference. It went from these even harmonics to odd harmonics, and it dropped. There's still some even harmonics there, but not too many of them. And plus, I've got it up a little bit, and it switched to odd harmonics. Or if I come over to here to tape, what's it doing there? You know, and you can see that it's dropping them down quite a bit. They're still there, but they're way more along the lines of saturation levels, even with it all the way over here to tape. Or if I go to tube type of saturation on here, of what it's doing there, you can see the even and the odd harmonics and the different levels across there. The point of that is that most of these plugins do things a little bit differently, so you really want to investigate what you're getting off there, calculate the harmonics so you know what you're adding when you want even or odd or saturation or what you're trying to do, that you have some kind of idea of what it's doing. And I've got this Neutron Sculptor. This thing will do something different. I've got this ozone plug-in here that does a different type of saturation, that if I turn it on, that you can see the type of saturation that's adding into it, that if I start bringing this down onto it, what kind of saturation. This adds a very unique saturation. You can see a lot of stuff happening in the lower end, but it's really fine over in here. So you can actually back off that quite a bit to lower that some, and there's a bunch of different types of saturations depending on the parameters that you enable on here, what it's actually going to do. So you kind of want to look at what it's doing, what type of saturation you're getting, and things like that. It can get a little bit complicated in some of these plugins, and you're going to have to research it a little bit to see what you're getting and whether or not that's what you want. Things like this one, this is Hornet Graphio. And this thing, if you put it on here and I go, I want some odd harmonics, and I turn this off, or if I want to quantize, I can quantize it here, and I've gone down to 15 bits, and you can see the saturation it's causing off that. But quantizing it might cause some other issues also. Now if I turn this off and I want to do this exciter, and I turn this on, and I just want to go odd, you can see that it jumps up here. I get this odd harmonic with this even harmonic on there that I can adjust the level of it coming into it. Or if I go to like the even harmonic on here, that I can go to even, you can see the even harmonic getting boosted way up. And it's basically trying to give you one harmonic and a little bit of saturation off the bottom. So, and it's giving us a lot of this low end stuff. So you really got to kind of look at whatever plugin. This is a cheap free one, but there's lots of them. You know, I mean, there are tons of them. There's ones like this M saturation. There's a saturator knob. This is a really simple saturation knob from Softtube. And this is adding some soft saturation, some even and odd harmonics going along there that you can adjust the levels of that. And it's a true saturation. They're fairly even spaced, even and odd harmonics. And the control of it isn't really good as far as control of which harmonics are happening there or the levels or anything like that. But it may be a fine saturation for something you're trying to do when you're just trying to add some saturation that's fairly evenly spaced, that this might be fine. You can actually add it fairly heavy if you look till it actually starts clipping and you start getting some actual clipping distortion. But most of the time you'd be using this very lightly across the lower end of the spectrum like that. So I mean, there's tons of them. You know, I mean, you got tube saturators. I mean, you've got this one right here that, you know, there's tons of them, all kinds of saturation plugins. And the biggest thing you want to keep in mind is to figure out what it does. You know, calculate the harmonics. Is it giving you even harmonics? Is it giving you odd harmonics? How many of them it's giving you? Is it giving you non-harmonic distortion? Is it tailing off? Is it fairly flat across the spectrum? You know, what's it giving you so that you understand when you go to use it what the components of the sound you're working with, and understanding what would sound better applying it to it. That's why I kind of recommended that Trash 2, because then you have a pretty good idea of what you're adding once you get your presets set, that you're not confused about what kind of saturation you're putting on there. And I've got mine set up to where it just about covers everything. But it's not unheard of every now and then for me to pull out a saturation knob that I'm used to using, you know, and throw something on there that works fine, that I've used on an oboe before, or, you know, a vocalist or something like that. But most of the time the saturation work is pretty, you know, it's pretty delicate. It's going to be blending with the noise, and you want to be pretty careful about what you add in there so it isn't just garbage. I mean, nobody wants to add garbage into their sound. So you want to have an idea what you're putting in there, because just like anything else, if you don't know what you're putting in there, how do you know that's going to come out? You get lucky, experiment, and it come out sounding okay, but it's probably not very well done if you don't even know what's going into it. So it's why I recommend most of the time something like Trash 2. I'm really happy with this plugin because I can open it up, and I have presets set up for it that can really give me exactly what I'm looking for. That I don't have no question on there that I'm going to add saturation, full spectrum coming off the fundamental and the other harmonics in the timbre. And I've got like square clipping that I'm pretty familiar with what it is. I've got an aggressive distortion that I can use saturation. I can add some even and odd harmonics with another plugin next to it if I need to, or I can add even and odd harmonics, a mix of them with two plugins, to where I'm adding some odd harmonic saturation and some lower even and hard saturation that's working together to make whatever I'm working on sound good. But it's sometimes really low-level work, like the noise we talked about, and we're going to do some applications in the coming videos. But sometimes it's a lot of really acute listening, because it's sometimes hard to hear it, you know. But in the end, you will know the difference of it. It's just like, you know, when we talked about reverb, sometimes, you know, it's so little that it's hardly even noticeable. But on the whole mix, when it gets done, if you took it off there, you would know it in a heartbeat that it was not there. And a lot of times this type of work is like that, and it's not, you know, as heavy kind of distortion or harmonic work that's really noticeable. And my normal suggestion is like a square clipping, or my saturation full spectrum is the one I normally go with, and I go at a fairly low level. I bring it way down and clean up the lower end, that way that it comes up there with the noise, that it's really musical and it offsets the noise. It'll be out of phase of the noise. It'll be more in phase with the timbre of the instrument and things like that. But you just want to kind of take a look at your plugins and see what it's giving you. And if you have questions, ask me, but it's not that hard. There's a bunch of calculation links on my channel, and like I said, I post a link here for you to go look at calculating harmonics, and it's not that difficult. There's even a calculator that lets you do it. And once you understand it, it's pretty easy to do. That way you have an understanding of whatever you're using is giving you. And there's tons of plugins. Don't be afraid to download a bunch of plugins that do saturation and see what they're doing. You know, you find one that does it really cool, you know, that it works really well, that I don't know that. I'm just gotten really used to using this one because they call it Trash, but it does a really good job for that kind of stuff and harmonic work. So I'm very happy with that plugin. They did a really good job to get that done. So just take a look at your plugins, see what kind of saturation it's giving you, and I do recommend you getting Trash 2, and I can give you the presets that I have for mine that I use, and you can augment them, adjust them, change them, do all kinds of things, make them a little bit different or whatever you want, but you got a pretty good set to work with or to start with to make them, you know, have a little bit of your flavor. Does that make sense? A little bit different the way you like it, and that's okay. You know, does that make sense? So that's just to get you looking at it so you can start to see those, and, you know, and calculating these harmonics so you can be able to see what it's doing, the sideband distortion, how much sideband distortion you're getting, the harmonic thing, how level is, how it evens off, if it tapers off, if it's fairly even, what's happening, where it's spiking, where it's not, so that you have a good understanding of what's happening with it. So peace, hope, love. I hope you enjoyed this short part of it, and in the next part, we're going to actually look at adding some saturation with my Trash 2 plugin and with noise, so we can see what exactly we're doing, so we can have a better idea. So get your headphones out and get ready for that, and I'll see you in just a minute. Okay, so by now we've got a pretty good understanding of saturation. Just the biggest thing to keep in mind is saturation is basically distortion that's more musical in nature, as in comparison to noise. There's just full spectrum in different shapes. But the saturation that we're talking about can be in different shapes also, but it's working off normally other components of the sound. And it just takes some research. You're going to want to experiment whatever plugins you're using to understand what you're getting. But we've talked about it quite a bit. So just kind of keep that in mind. It's just low-level distortion. It's normally trying to emulate even harmonics with some saturation distortion. Non-harmonic distortion is more like overdriving the speed capabilities of a circuit or overdriving the amperage capabilities of a circuit. That's like clipping distortion. That's more odd harmonics that are prominent. But it can be like full spectrum like I showed you. But and it's a lot of times that it ramps also, but sometimes it's a level. So you really got to experiment around it. My humble opinion of it is that I like my full spectrum level saturation to come up underneath it, and then sometimes I'll go in there and add some even or odd harmonics at low levels to try to emulate either overdriving the speed capabilities of a circuit or the amperage capabilities of a circuit, and sometimes a little bit of both to emulate that type of analog saturation that's normally happening with analog gear. So just kind of keep that in mind as the next video, we're going to actually apply some saturation and we'll talk about it. I mean, there's a few ways to apply it. I mean, you can apply it right on the track. You can put it right on the track and render it whenever you think that it's done, meaning when you get to a point in the mixing stage that you're done, you can render it. And you can actually split channels. So if you have something that will split channels like I do in my studio here, that basically I can go in there and just put normal channel split. This is either a channel split that's the right and left or normal, or I can do a frequency split. So there's different frequency ranges on either side. But just normal, that I've got the actual audio coming out here normally, then I got the audio coming out here normally, and I can blend this in. I can bring my whatever saturation I'm adding on the other channel that's the same as the other channel, not like right or left, and then bring it up in and blend it, and maybe have to turn this level up some because it will definitely drop in level because you've split it to two different sides so that it isn't clipping. So you might have to bring up one side. So that is an option. Another option is you can sidechain it. You can make an FX bus and then just on the send on the track that you're working on, you can run a send to that FX bus, or you can run a send to another bus to blend it in, or you can actually get on the plugin itself and sidechain it to it. Say pick that plugin that we're looking at. One second, pick that plugin we're looking at and sidechain it in, and then just bring the level of that. Let's say that FX bus is right here, then I just want to bring that level up as it's bringing that saturation. I can do that great for a bunch of different tracks to emulate analog saturation, along with my noise and things like that. Sometimes it's harder to do that with noise files, but you can with plugins when we're doing saturation. And the same thing with a bus. You can just route a send to that to a bus or something like that from multiple tracks, or you can make up a bunch of different buses, so because you might be doing different types of saturation, or different FX buses, or different buses that you have your plugins on to do different types of saturations for different instruments or different groups of instruments and things like that. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go through that, because in the next video we are going to get into actually adding some saturation. So I suggest you get your headphones on and get ready, and we'll sit down and we'll start looking at adding some saturation, and we'll actually go through it, adding it with this file that already has noise added into it, so we can look at it as we blend into it. And then we'll go through, look at different types of saturation. We're just going to do this with trash, so the series should be pretty short on saturation, because you'll just have to experiment with the plugins you're using, seeing what it's doing, and then begin experimenting, implementing them. But I do recommend trash too, because it does a great job as you will see when we start doing it in the next video. Which you'll have some headphones on, so you'll be able to hear the saturation work we do, and we'll do it also in conjunction with the noise to see what it sounds like, with the culmination of both of them being implemented as we go through this process of sculpting processors. So peace, hope, love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this next video on saturation, and I will see you in the next video.